The Bank of Canada chose once again to hit the pause button on interest rate cuts, holding its key interest rate at 2.75%. And joining me now to talk more about what kind of ripple effects this could have on the economy is financial analyst Bryan Borzykowski. Bryan, good to speak with you.
Good to see you.
First, I'm curious to get your take on this. What do you make of the bank's decision today? Was this the right move?
I think it probably was. It wasn't a huge surprise, although you never know exactly what's going to happen these days with all of the trade ups and downs. But that is why they did decide to pause. Essentially, there's so much uncertainty still in the economy. Every day it feels like Donald Trump is putting tariffs on, taking tariffs off. There's a 90-day pause with China. What will happen when that comes back? Reciprocal tariffs might come back on July 8th. They need to, I think, kind of pause and wait and see what's going to happen, which is essentially what they said in their statement after they made the announcement that they weren't going to make a move. So probably a good move. The economy in Canada is doing okay for now. It grew sort of 2.2% in the last quarter, and that is still all right. There is some softening that is appearing. It does seem sort of the tariffs, especially in the auto sector, are starting to affect jobs in Canada. But it's hard to know the extent just because of all of the pullbacks and, tariffs on, tariffs off. And so they, just taking a wait and see approach right now is probably the prudent move.
All right, you mentioned the tariffs leading to uncertainty. What other factors are at play, though, when it comes to this decision?
Well, one of the big things is inflation. And while inflation was down at the last announcement, it's only growing by 1.7%. That was largely because of energy. The carbon tax was taken out, and so that was showing up in gas prices. But other parts of the economy, if you strip that out, inflation actually increased by 2.3% year over year, and that is higher than the 2% rate that the Bank of Canada wants to see at. Food was up higher, and so they're looking and seeing whether inflation now potentially because of tariffs, maybe other reasons, is rising faster again. And so they don't want to lower rates in case people start spending more money and demand goes up and then prices rise. And so they're looking at that as well. But tariffs for sure are the number one thing, and tariffs have an impact on inflation, an impact on economy, on jobs. And so that was the central theme in their announcement, was just that we don't know what's happening with tariffs, and that's why we're pausing, although inflation data in Canada is important to look at, and that's what they're really looking at, both of these things.
All right, this was the second consecutive pause by the Bank of Canada. Is this something we should get comfortable with, or could cuts be coming still?
I think we still could see cuts. A lot of the bank economists are expecting 2 or 3 more cuts over the year. The Federal Reserve in the U.S. hasn't really cut at all, and so we'll see if they do. Could that influence us? You have to be careful. The Bank of Canada wants to be careful about us cutting too much and the Federal Reserve not cutting at all. They sort of try and keep it in line a bit, ideally, if they can, although our economies are acting differently and are different. So I would expect more cuts to come if we see sort of inflation stay at a relatively normal level at around that 2%. If it does go below, if the economy weakens too much, we could see rate cuts too to spark the economy. But unlike maybe any other time in history, there is this balance that they have to match. They have to, a line they have to tread over. What happens if we do have these tariffs and everything becomes more expensive, and what happens if the economy slows? Because if you don't want to lower rates and then have inflation go even higher, but you need to lower rates to keep the economy going. So it's very precarious and confusing here. And I don't even think the Bank of Canada, and they basically have said as much, isn't at all sure what they're going to do next.
Yeah, a bit of a guessing game at this point. Bryan, thanks so much for your insight. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you, you too.